I've gone through a lot of different problems in my life and my business, and this formula I'm going to share with you today is actually how I solve everything in ways that many people never thought was possible. In fact, this is what I believe the greatest innovators in the world use in their everyday life and their business and everything else. And I got to give credit to Craig Groeschel, who's a pastor out in Oklahoma, who said on one of his podcasts that limitation is actually the driving force for innovation.
You might create an artificial deadline and say, what if we only had 6 weeks? Not 6 months, but 6 weeks. Guess what that'll do? That'll drive innovative thinking.
That made me really think about it, because the more I realized that your limitations actually make you more innovative, the more I started to say, well, how much limitation can we put on ourselves? How hard can we make the situation? And the harder we make it, the more creative we must become. Here's the formula, guys. It's not rocket science. I know it's going to blow your minds, but it's actually just basic algebra. X plus Y equals Z. I know this is mind-blowing, but stay with me here, okay? These variables all represent a piece of every single problem that you'll face in your life or your business. So what Z represents is the goal. Hey, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the outcome we are looking for? X represents a solution. So, hey, if this is our goal, I want to make $100,000, what are some things I can do? I mean, if you have no limitation on that and you say, how do I make $100,000? I mean, your results will be endless. You'll be like, oh, I could be a salesperson. I could flip houses. I could wholesale. I could, be a content creator. I could go start this business, that business. Like, there's an endless amount of ways to go make $100,000. So what you have to do is add another component. And this would be the constraints. And the constraints are essentially the limitations that you're placing on yourself. This is where you start to figure out, man, what is the best solution to this problem? Because where there are no constraints, there's infinite amounts of solutions. If you had all the money in the world, or all the time in the world, or all the employees and resources in the world, well, you don't have to innovate. Just spend more money, spend more time. I mean, this is the whole point of why I don't like when people say, oh, I need 80 hours a week to do this. I'm working so hard. I say, well, why can't you do it in 40, right? I don't think you have to work 80 hours a week. I think you can get the same result, AKA the same goal, in 40 hours a week, but that's going to change how you do it. It's going to change the solution and how you go about the process. So this is why constraints are important, because by saying, hey, I want this done in less time and with less effort, you now have to think of a new way to do it. You can't just rely on the way that you've always been going about it. So let me give you some real world examples, right? First off, let's just say the goal here is to make $100,000. You're like, man, I want to make an extra $100,000. We talked about this earlier. You could say, man, there's a million solutions to this. I could be salesperson, blah, 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 right? What you shouldn't do is think of solutions yet. You should actually force the constraints on yourself and say, hey, here's what I am actually willing to do. This is how much time I'm willing to put into it. Everything. This is how much money I have. So you essentially want to list your resources here. So the biggest resources people have are, number one, their own time, right? So how much of your own time can you dedicate to this? And I would say, okay, with my own time, maybe I am going to add, 20 hours a week to this endeavor. I'll commit 20 hours a week, right? Maybe I'm working 40 hours a week in my job. I want to start this side hustle. I'm going to put 20 hours a week towards it until it grows and gets to where I need it to be. All right, cool. Well, that's your time component of the resource. How much money do you have to put towards this? How much are you willing to invest, right? It's not even how much money do you have, but how much are you willing to put towards this endeavor? Maybe you say, look, I'm willing to put $5,000 towards this endeavor. That's what I've got saved up that I'm comfortable investing into the business, into mentorship, into, tools, everything that I'm going to need to go and make this $100,000. And then the last piece that you would ask yourself is, okay, I got my time that I want to spend. I've got how much money I'm willing to put. Now, what's the time frame that I want to get this done? And so the time frame in this case is, let's say, hey, I got to make $100,000 in the next 12 months. I'll give myself 12 months to make $100,000. So now, these are the constraints. And clearly you could add other constraints too. You could say, hey, I want it to be in this industry. I want to be doing these things. The more constraints you add, the harder the solution is to figure out. But the more innovative or clear the solution will become. So now that I've got my constraints and I have my goal, I can say, well, okay, what solution fits in this equation? What solution is going to allow me to work 20 hours a week, spend less than $5,000, and accomplish this $100,000 goal in 12 months? And you start just backtracking. You're like, okay, well, would being an Uber driver get me there? Right? Can I make $100,000 doing 20 hours of Uber a week? No, that's not going to get you there. So what I like to do with solutions is start to just brainstorm a bunch of solutions. So I would say, oh, okay, Uber. Let's say I'm going to flip houses. Let's say I'm going to be a creator. Let's say I'm going to be a salesperson. Let's say I'm going to be, DoorDash. I don't know, right? There's so many different things that people could do to try and make money, right? And you just start going down what works, what doesn't work. Could I flip houses or wholesale? 20 hours a week, $5,000 invested, 12 months, get to 100,000. A lot of people would think it's not possible. I know it's possible. I've seen plenty of people do it, okay? So yes, we would say flipping is a solution or a viable solution, let's just say. Okay, what about a content creator? If I put 20 hours a week, $5,000, 12 months, can I make $100,000? Can you do it? Technically, yes. Just like flipping, we'll say, yes, it's technically possible. Then you would go into, okay, salesperson. Can I make 100 grand doing 20 hours of sales a week? Is it technically possible? Sure. DoorDash. Is it possible? Probably not, right? So essentially now, what I do is the next level of filtering. I say, okay, these are 3 solutions that are, possible, but now we got to look at other things too. And I would call these like maybe some P's. Maybe these are the 3 P's or the 4 P's. The first thing I'm going to look at is how probable is it, right? Not just that it's possible, because I never want to discount anything despite how crazy or low chance it is. Like, I would rather think creatively and list everything that could potentially work as a possibility. And then I want to filter it even more so from there. So, how probable is it? How purposeful is it? Right? Because let's say all things were equal. Well, I would want to choose the solution that I get the most fulfillment, that I get the most purpose out of. So purposeful matters. And then the last one I would say is how profitable. And profitable is just because I wanted to fit another P, but really what's the long-term outcome of this choice, right? Like, if I chose to flip houses, what's the probability that I'll actually succeed on it with my skill set, everything else? How much am I passionate about this? How purposeful do I feel by flipping houses? And then the third is, how profitable can it actually be? I mean, it can get me to 100,000, but could it get me to more? Could it get me to $1 million? And the answer would be yes. Then you'd say, okay, what if I was a salesperson, right? How probable is it that I will get to $100,000? And you might say, well, it's actually more probable that I'll become a salesperson at $100,000 than maybe a content creator. And I would say that that's for sure true. Like, you have a way better chance of making 100 grand being a salesperson than you do being a content creator. It's pretty much a fact for most people, right? There are way more $100,000 salespeople in the world than there are content creators. Okay, most creators actually don't really make much. Okay, but you got to ask yourself, how purposeful is it? Do I feel one type of way being content creator or salesperson? A lot of people have no desire to be on camera. They would be much happier just selling. So, if you're that person, if you're that personality, you're better off, selling. And then how profitable? Well, this is kind of like where it starts to get a little bit dicey, because, what's your potential in the sales world? Maybe profitable should also be a P of potential. How big can this thing get? And at the end of the day, right? I mean, being a salesperson, there's lots of great sales roles out there. You can make 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, but creators can make millions and millions of dollars if it really hits. So I would say that the creator has more potential. And honestly, too, now that I'm just saying this, let's just change this out for potential, because it just makes more sense. Like, what's the potential of all of this? Profit is an outcome of potential anyway. So anyways, it's like, man, am I more potential driven? Am I more like, man, going for the sky, going for the big home run? Or am I more risk averse and more probability driven, where it's like, no, I want the for sure base hit. I want the more safe single that I know that, hey, if I do this, I'm gonna win. I'll be honest with you. When I started flipping couches, that was my first successful entrepreneurial endeavor. The probability of that succeeding was extremely high. I mean, it was very simple. It's like, I buy a couch and I sell it. If I can get just one or two couches a day, I'll probably make $100,000. Like, that's very highly likely to happen, right? But how purposeful was it? Well, I didn't really enjoy it that much. After a while, you're just like, this sucks. And then how much potential does couch flipping have? And the reality is it didn't really have much potential. It just kind of like had a pretty low cap. So then I looked at, okay, well, flipping houses, what about that? And it's like, okay, how probable is it that I could succeed flipping houses? Well, I think with the right mentorship, right? If you joined Wealthy Investor, I think your probability of success is going to jump tremendously, exponentially, in fact, right? If you just tried to learn off YouTube University and had no tools, no coaching, nothing, it's probably not very high probability. But if you had the same leads I have, the coaching, the tools, everything else, I would guess your probability will jump 100 times, honestly. Now, who knows where your original, probability was? You might have been less than 1% chance of making it, but if 1%, 0.01% turns to 10%, I mean, that's pretty good, right? Or even 50% or whatever the case is, right? And then purposeful. I actually enjoyed flipping houses. It was great. And what was the potential? Well, the potential is my life today. It's made me a lot of money and done great. So anyways, this is kind of how you have to look at every scenario and keep filtering it down. You take your goal, like I talked about. You decide, man, what are the constraints that I'm willing to achieve this goal? And then what are the different solutions? Like, I'll be honest with you, in different phases of my life, how this has played out. I remember one of my goals was to, be a known house flipper. I know this is a vague goal, but hear me out, right? I was like, I want to be one of the most known house flippers in the world. And it was like, okay, so what are potential solutions to this? Well, the potential solutions of this up until that point was, okay, you get a TV show. That was kind of it. Like, hey, you want to be known, you got to get a TV show. You can also do social media, at that time, TikTok and YouTube and stuff were starting to come out. But like, man, if you want to be known, these were basically the only two ways to do it. And so I'm like, all right, there's not many solutions here. Well, what are the constraints? And I remember I was actually like being interviewed for TV shows and stuff up to this point. And they were like, bro, you got to work like 60 hours a week on the show filming. You're not going to make any money. And it may or may not get approved. And I'm like, that sounds like an awful scenario. Okay, I definitely ain't doing that. And so I immediately was like, I'm not doing TV. Don't want to do it. Never will. And, I just said, okay, well, what are my constraints? Well, man, I'm only willing to work 20 hours a week at this. I don't want to travel. So I'll put a no travel right here because traveling sucks. I'm not going to go like to fly around to film TV shows. And I want to just do it right here from Las Vegas. And, I still got to be able to work in my business. I'm not going to go spend 60 hours filming a show and let I'll make way more money just working in my business. So overall, like at that time, these were my constraints. And I said, well, the only choice really is social media because I can definitely do social media without traveling, working 20 hours a week at it, and still work in my business. In fact, I filmed all my videos right here in this office to get to where we're at today. And what's crazy is as we started to look at it from the other things like, okay, well, social media is the choice. What's the probability of success? It was like, well, it was actually pretty high because there weren't many people on social media trying to do it. And so I felt like I had all the intangibles. I felt like I had the experience, the desire, all those things. So I thought it was pretty probable, especially because I didn't mention this with constraints, but I was like, dude, I'll put any amount of money. Like I got unlimited budget to make social media work. I'm making money in my businesses. I'll put everything I got, getting the cameras, hiring the staff, all that good stuff. So I thought it was actually very profitable or probable. I thought that I would have a lot of purpose doing it. I really enjoy helping people and making these videos. And then I thought the potential was massive. I was like, man, if social media hits, it's actually bigger than TV. I thought that 5 years ago. I'm like, you can get millions of views in one video. One TV show is lucky to get 100,000 views these days. People ain't watching TV. So I thought that the potential was massive. And so because of all that, I went all in on social media and it paid off, right? And I've used this framework for so many other things in my life and my business. If I've been in a sticky situation, having to get creative with how to pay people back or how to get out of some drama or how to handle a certain situation, I've always run it through this framework. I'm like, what are the potential solutions? What are the constraints? What's the goal here? What's the outcome we're really looking for? And when you start to create and think systematically like this, you will come up with innovative solutions that no one else did. I thought TikTok was a great thing because no one was doing it, and sure enough, it worked, right? Everyone else did not think it was a viable solution. They were still thinking TV was the solution. But because I limited myself and said, I'm not working 60 hours a week, I'm not working on weekends, I'm hanging out with my family, I'm still going to run my business, it forced me into a different solution that had massive reward. And the same is true with my business today, with Wealthy Investor. Basically, I've gone through this process and I'm like, man, what's our goal? Okay, we want to get monthly recurring revenue now. What do we got to do that? Well, we got to have stickier things besides just coaching. So let's do softwares, let's do leads, let's do things that make people stick. Okay, great. Now, what's the potential rewards of all these things if that's what we're going to do? How much is it going to cost? How much can we charge? And, it makes you revamp the business, revamp the product, revamp the offer, make it better and better. And then sure enough, all of a sudden you've got this innovative solution. So use this in your life, use it in your business, and you're going to be a lot more creative.